Here we go, guys. Another episode of Stay the Braves. I'm back with you. Unfortunately, still not a lot of action coming out from Alex Anthopoulos and the Braves front office to talk about. So we're going to trudge onward, wondering when anything might actually come down. We're all, I'm sure, a little frustrated with this offseason and just wondering what is going on. But in this episode, we are going to identify the best options left available for the Braves at this point in the offseason. I really still believe the Braves are lying in wait to make at least one big move. And despite the Braves being totally devoid of any big moves so far, the good news is there are still some really good impact players left, including some of the names we mentioned at the very beginning of the offseason. So it's not as if the cupboard is totally dry. But it's certainly quite frustrating to watch, your rival teams add big-time players, and the Braves just continue. At one point, I'm like, is Alex Anthopoulos just trolling us as he's adding more and more guys on minor league contracts that, are 34 years old? He signed Garrett Cooper just about 24 hours ago. It just keeps happening. That's the only news out of Braves country, is signing minor league 34-year-olds that are going to play in AAA. So, yeah, it's depth. It's better depth than, I guess, what the Braves had last year. But that's kind of all that's happened so far, and it still makes me wonder, is Anthopoulos just lying in wait? And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about some of these guys that are going to be coming down the pike. So let's get this episode started. Okay, guys, so a couple other Braves podcasts out there have done some episodes regarding, if the Braves could only make one move, who would you pick? This is going to be similar to that, and whether you believe it or not, I'd already planned for this episode before those others dropped. But what I would tell you is I'm going to go in a different direction. So if you happen to listen to multiple Braves podcasts out there, I am definitely going to have some different conclusions than those. So you just kind of have to wait for those as we go on. But before we launch into the heart of this episode, I do want to address one question. Do I think the Braves are trying to reset their CBT number? In other words, do the Braves have pretty strict financial restrictions on them that they're operating under? A lot of people are starting to really assume that simply because the Braves have been so unwilling, it seems, to act on any big moves this offseason. But my direct answer is no. I don't think the Braves are strictly trying to stay under that CBT number, that threshold. So despite their inaction to this point, I really don't think they're focused on that. I think they are being consistent with how they have acted in the past. Alex Anthopoulos has a specific number that he's typically given that is their budget, and he can't go over that. And, he can calculate any CBT penalties into that total budget. And I think that's still how the Braves are operating. That's how they've always operated. And while when Anthopoulos talks to the media, I think he's not always super forthright, and he can talk in circles about a lot of things, as any GM would do. But I think he's always been pretty straightforward with that's how the Braves operate. He's not going to give you a number, but he's going to tell you that, we can raise payroll or that sort of thing. So I still think that's how the Braves are going to do things. I think a lot is going on behind the scenes that we obviously don't know about, that is holding them back from acting yet. But I don't think that means they won't be adding, I think, fairly soon. So I think Anthopoulos is more about the penalties that cost him in draft picks and limiting how often the Braves step into that. So there's a certain threshold he may avoid going over. That's basically what happened in 2024. The Braves were only a few $100,000 from hitting, I think it was the third penalty threshold, and they would have lost 2 draft picks if that had happened. So they didn't do that. And I think the same might be true in the types of players that they target in free agency. And if they do sign some free agents, I would be a little more surprised if they sign guys with qualifying offers, again, because if you sign those guys, you forfeit draft picks. So there's certainly, again, it might not be a hard and fast thing, but I think it's something that's actually a little more something the Braves talk about and consider than strictly going over the first CBT threshold number. So in this episode, in this exercise, I'm not saying that the Braves can only add one piece. Again, some of the other Braves podcasts out there, I do listen to them occasionally, and they did a pretty good job of breaking things down. But they're limiting themselves if you could only sign one. I'm not necessarily thinking in those terms. What I'm thinking of now is, okay, if the Braves are prioritizing their choices from this point forward, again, because I don't think the Braves are necessarily going to limit themselves to just one addition. So I'm going to give you my top several priorities. I'm going to give you a priority list and what my thinking is going into each of those. So I'm also going to give you my top choices based on what I think the Braves need. I'm not necessarily trying to predict Anthopoulos' moves or read his mind, because at this point we know that's a pretty dangerous game to play. So I'm picking from the following four players that are left. I'm not just looking at free agents. Okay, I'm looking at free agents and also players that have been pretty consistently talked about in trade rumors that we are pretty certain are available through trade. Okay, so the four players that I'm going to talk about and give you my priorities list is one starting pitcher, Pablo Lopez, starting shortstop, Ha-Seong Kim, outfielder, Luis Robert, and relief pitcher, Tanner Scott. Okay, so I've broken it down. These are the four fairly clear needs that the Braves really do need to address this offseason. We'll see if they address them all. But starting pitcher, shortstop, outfield, and relief pitcher. And I'm going to go through why I chose each of those players first. So let's start with Luis Robert in the outfield. The other, I think, big name that you could look at that's still available is free agent Jurickson Profar. So Profar is coming off his career year. He's entering his age 32 season. I actually like him, but he's really only performed for San Diego. If he can't get a 3-year deal with San Diego, which I think is what he's looking for, or if he can't get a deal at all with San Diego, maybe he could fall into the Braves' lap on a 1 or 2-year deal. I think they might be more interested in him for 1 or 2 years instead of maybe 15 million per. Maybe he slips down to 12 million per, right? And then it starts getting a little more realistic, because you don't have to give up anything to get Profar other than the dollars. Robert, obviously, you have to trade for. But Luis Robert has MVP upside that probably Profar doesn't have when healthy. Okay, and that's the big key. What happens if Robert can stay healthy, and what happens when you can get him out of probably what is the worst franchise in baseball that barely won 30 games last year, and that has to be hard to play through. And what happens when you get him into a winning organization around a bunch of good guys and all that? We don't know. It might have no impact, or he might flourish into something way better than they've even seen at his best with the White Sox. Robert is signed for $15 million for this year with an opt-out. So if he is bad, you could clear him off the books after 1 year, or you could exercise his option after 2025. He's $20 million a year for the next 2 years. So there's a lot of flexibility in his contract. I think the Braves, this would be very attractive to them. He won't cost a ton of prospects. Now, if there's a couple teams interested, that might boost the asking price a little bit more than what would be on paper. But I'm thinking, Nacho Alvarez plus 1 or 2 prospects. If they'd be really interested in Kelenic just because he's cheap and controllable, maybe you could throw him in there with one other prospect and Nacho. But that sort of thing is, I think, you could get Luis Robert and not give up your top prospects. Again, at this point with Nacho Alvarez, I like him, but I just don't see, unless Ozzy gets injured, I don't see a spot for him on the Braves Major League roster. again, I'm just going through these guys yet. I have not given you guys, I'm not going in any particular order. So I'm not giving you my priority of which guy I like the best yet. Okay, so hang with me for that. All right, so the number 2 guy to talk about, Ha-Seong Kim. Who else could I have looked at shortstop? Bo Bichette. Okay, Bo Bichette will make $17.5 million in his final year of arbitration before free agency. He isn't likely to be traded until the trade deadline, in my mind, unless the Blue Jays just really got, bowled away. But, he's coming off his worst year. This is his lowest trade value. And you would just say it doesn't make a ton of sense to me that the Blue Jays would trade him right now. They still have a pretty good team. Yeah, in my mind, they have the Vlad Guerrero Jr. issue as well. He'll be a free agent after this year. So to me, it makes sense for them to go for it one more time, see where they are at the trade deadline. And, if the Braves haven't made another shortstop move, Bo Bichette at the trade deadline actually makes a ton of sense for them. But I'm saying Ha-Seong Kim over Bo Bichette. Bichette's next contract is going to be greatly impacted by how he plays in 2025. If he has 2 bad years in a row, he's not going to be near as expensive on the free agent market. If he has a big bounce back, this dude's going to be incredibly expensive, and I think really, really difficult for the Braves to re-sign if they were to acquire him now. So Ha-Seong Kim likely won't be ready until maybe May. He's coming off of a shoulder injury and surgery. That's the big caveat with bringing him in. But he has been an exceptional defender and base runner for the Padres. He gets on base at a good clip, and he's sneaky, really, really valuable. His value to me is super similar to Dansby Swanson. They have a similar OPS plus. They get it in different ways. Swanson has more power, less average and on base, and it's the opposite with Ha-Seong Kim, but both incredibly good defenders, and both incredibly instinctive base runners, that sort of thing. Kim will steal more bases than Dansby. And, he's probably set coming off this injury to take a 1-year prove-it contract. He might want to do that, but if he's willing to take a longer deal, that might be more advantageous to any team that signs him, to let him kind of bounce back in year 1, get healthy, and then roll after that. So I think he's likely to take a, $14 to $16 million, 1-year deal this year. But again, with free agency, who knows? Signing Kim, if the Braves could sign Kim for like a 3-year deal, that would help them bridge the gap way better to whoever the next shortstop might be. You can go back to my previous episode. We talked about the big weakness of the Braves organization is really shortstop all the way down through the minors. And having a guy like Kim man that position much stronger than Arcia could for 3 years would be awesome. I mean, Kim, we're talking about, he's had 2 5-WAR seasons before last year in which he was hurt for half the year, and he was on pace for a 5-WAR season last year too. So this is a very valuable shortstop, and I really like Ha-Seong Kim a lot. It would also, adding him, Arcia could move to the bench. It would improve your bench depth, which is needed in case of a, Arcia or Albies or Riley injury. Okay, so Ha-Seong Kim, I mean, again, a lot of that would be true with Bo Bichette too if you added another shortstop. Starting pitcher, okay, so I chose Pablo Lopez. 2 other names that I could have chosen instead, Luis Castillo or Jack Flaherty. Castillo is 32 and coming off of somewhat of a down year. He's signed for $24 million for the next 3 years with a vesting $25 million option for a 4th year. Not sure if that one would vest. I mean, he would have to stay healthy and pitch a bunch of innings in that 3rd year for that 4th year to vest. So you'd get him for at least 3 years at $24 million, more per year than, what the Braves are paying anybody else. Lopez and Flaherty are about the same age. They're both about 29 years old. But Pablo Lopez has really been the picture of consistency. He's just been a solid 3 to 3.5 WAR pitcher for most of his career. Flaherty, he had a great year in 2024, but this was the first good year he had since 2 really good back-to-back years way back in 2018 and 2019 with the Cardinals. So Flaherty, not the picture of consistency, both health-wise or just performance-wise. Lopez has been. Now, Lopez hasn't been much more than a three. I mean, but that's basically what Fried was last year, Schwellenbach, right? 3.5. So that's a good middle of the rotation arm. So if you got Pablo Lopez, you'd get him for 3 years, 21.75 million per year. Flaherty, you could probably get him for about the same amount on the free agent market. And again, you're getting him without having to give up anybody else. You're not having to trade for him. But the question would be, what are you actually going to get for him? Do you believe his 2024 was what he can give you for 3 more years if you sign him for that? Maybe you can get him for 2 years at this point as we're getting further down into the offseason. So, okay, relief pitcher, last one, Tanner Scott. I'm going to choose him. There's a lot of relievers out there. You could choose Kirby Yates, might be another guy to throw in there. Jeff Hoffman just signed with the Blue Jays, so he's off the board. Quite a few guys are starting to go off the board now. So Tanner Scott would fill the hole left by A.J. Minter. You have this lefty, really good lefty arm for, he could set up Iglesias for now, and when Iglesias presumably leaves after 2025, he could be your closer. Scott backed up an all-star 2023 season with an even better 2024, so I think he's kind of proved that he is a high-level reliever. He will be expensive. I mean, most people are projecting 4 years, $55 to $60 million. The Braves already have a lot of money invested in their bullpen, so would they be willing to do that? I don't know. Kirby Yates would maybe be as expensive, but probably just on a 1-year deal. Obviously, he's not coming from the left side. He's coming from the right side, but maybe the Braves would prefer to do that. They lost Joe Jimenez probably for the year. And they know Kirby Yates, right? He was with them for 2 years, so they have some familiarity there. Okay, so again, of all the guys that I was kind of choosing from, let me just go through it one more time. For the outfield, trade for Luis Robert, or you sign Jurickson Profar in free agency. I'm choosing Luis Robert. For shortstop, you sign Ha-Seong Kim through free agency, or you trade for Bo Bichette. I'm in this situation would choose Ha-Seong Kim. For starting pitching, this was a tougher call, but I'm choosing Pablo Lopez over trading for Luis Castillo or signing Jack Flaherty. And relief pitcher, I'm choosing free agent Tanner Scott over free agent Kirby Yates. Okay, so let's go from fourth best to best. And my fourth best option of the guys available on the market right now would be Tanner Scott. So here's where I'm different from some of those other podcasts. If you listen to those guys, they're choosing this as their number one to go after the bullpen. And I guess in some ways I understand that. The Braves have lost Joe Jimenez, and they've lost A.J. Minter. And the bullpen on paper is certainly weaker. I think there's some guys that are going to step up. I would like the Braves to address the bullpen, but I don't know if you throw that much money at one guy in Tanner Scott. Okay, so I do like Tanner Scott a lot, and I would be happy if the Braves add him. He just wouldn't be on the top of my priority list here. So the Braves have invested, again, a lot of money in their bullpen over the years. I mean, just Iglesias alone is making $16 million. Joe Jimenez, who's not going to probably pitch this year, making $9 million. Would they go for a big Tanner Scott deal also? I don't know. If the team budget is looser than we think, then why not? But relievers typically don't have as much impact on the team. So that's part of the reason I'm dropping him down to number 4. Now, he could have some big impact in the postseason, maybe even more so than the regular season. And he did have a very remarkable 4-WAR season, according to Baseball Reference last year. That's crazy in terms of a reliever. So yeah, he is coming off a dominant year. But anyways, the last negative on Scott is that he comes with a qualifying offer. Okay, so I've kind of mentioned that. I think the Braves, I don't think it's a hard no, but I think they tend to shy away from guys with qualifying offers. You lose a draft pick if you sign them. They did sign Will Smith back in the day when he had a qualifying offer attached to him. So again, it's not a hard no, but I think it makes it a little less likely. There have been some rumblings that maybe Tanner Scott and the Braves even already have a deal in place, but it's just a gentleman's agreement, and it's not happened yet. I mean, I have no evidence of that. The Braves are so tight-lipped, it's hard for me to believe that. But, it could be the case. He is still on the board. So we'll have to see on that one. All right, my number 3 from the 4 guys I chose is Luis Robert in the outfield. So Robert is, again, often injured, and he's only had one great year with the White Sox. That was in 2023. But he's been on a horrid team, known for their serious team culture issues. Does changing teams, does changing clubhouses, and going from one of the worst teams in the history of baseball to a really, really good playoff contending team of the Braves, does that reinvigorate his career? It very well might. It certainly couldn't hurt. But it doesn't mean you get him in and suddenly he's not dealing with injuries anymore. Obviously, he would have to stay healthy. So this uncertainty, to me, drops him to number 3. One of the better things about Robert is he likely won't be very expensive, and I've already gone over what it might take to get him. And his contract with the opt-outs after 25, I think, makes this deal very appealing. In reality, a Robert deal probably doesn't preclude you from going out and getting other guys. So this is where I'm like, just saying that the Braves might only make one big deal, getting Luis Robert to me would not, say we can't go out and get a pitcher or get a shortstop or whatever, fill in the blank. But in terms of priority in making the team better, it'd be great to get Luis Robert for left field, but I would have other priorities first. All right, so my number 2 in terms of this priority list is Pablo Lopez. So adding a starter, it just has bigger impacts across the board, right? Adding a middle of the rotation starter who is good enough to pitch in the postseason is just super valuable, and the Braves need a starter that is going to cover innings and be hopefully reliable. And Lopez certainly has been that. I mean, if you think about the Braves starting rotation, okay, Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, Spencer Schwellenbach, all 3 of those. Sale finally had a season where he was healthy, except till the very end of the year. Ronaldo Lopez coming in to the year, a lot of people had question marks of could he withstand a full season, transitioning from the bullpen to starter, and he did go on the IL twice. And then you have Schwellenbach, who he pitched the most innings that he ever had by a long shot this year, and we don't know how he's going to bounce back from that. And then you've got Spencer Strider coming back from his brace procedure surgery. Again, huge question marks there. If all that works out and all those guys stay healthy, the Braves have one of the best rotations in baseball. But that's a big if. And so that's why I think adding a starter that you feel pretty confident is going to be there in post is super important. So this is why I think Pablo Lopez would jump up to my number 2 position. Now, again, guys, you might disagree with me on Lopez. Maybe you would go Flaherty. Maybe you'd go Luis Castillo. Maybe you'd go somewhere else because it will be fairly expensive to acquire Lopez. I've seen a couple of things recently on social media saying the Braves would have to give up Drake Baldwin, Hurston Waldrop, and A.J. Smith-Shawver, something like that. And man, that to me, that would be hard to stomach, especially giving up Drake Baldwin. You guys might know how much I like him. So maybe that's too expensive, right? Maybe the Braves talk to the Twins and it's just not what they're willing to do and they pivot to something else. But strictly in terms of adding, the pitchers on the market, Pablo Lopez would be my favorite addition for the Braves. All right, so obviously with Lopez being number 1, this leaves shortstop and Ha-Seong Kim as my favorite addition for the Braves of the guys that are available on the market. So the shoulder injury is the big question mark. And that's where I'm assuming if the Braves were to make this move, they would be very comfortable with his shoulder and that it's okay. Obviously, if he's not healthy or there are question marks, you just don't even go there, right? But If his shoulder's good, then I think it's a no-brainer to add Ha-Seong Kim. You're getting a really, really good shortstop, probably at a discount because he's coming off of the injury. His 2 previous full seasons for the Padres were sneaky great. Okay, in 2022, he put up a 4.9 WAR season. In 2023, a 5.8 WAR season. And, he's not going to light the world on fire just with the bat. He's going to be around a league average, 100 WRC plus type of hitter, similar to a Dansby Swanson, though, like I said, in different ways, less power, more average and on base. But he does it with the glove. He does it with the base running. Kind of everything about his game is just very well-rounded. And of course, we saw Arcia at his very best was league average. I think Ha-Seong Kim, is more consistent at that league average hitter. Kim will be 29 in 2025. So if you were able to get him, especially for 2 or 3 years, you're getting him in the heart of his prime. If the Braves can get him on a longer deal, like I said, that's great, and they should do it. Look, I think he's more well-rounded of a player than Willy Adames, who just got a 7-year, $182 million deal from the Giants. He's a very similar player to Dansby Swanson, who got 7 years, $177 million from the Cubs. Obviously, he's not likely to get a deal similar to that, at least not right now. That might be why he's probably just going to go for a 1-year deal. But again, we'll see. He might have other priorities. So I would say Ha-Seong Kim is at Dansby Swanson's level. Again, just with a different offensive skill set. It would be great to add a guy in the lineup with a lower strikeout rate, a good on-base percentage, a great base runner, going to steal you 30-plus bases, and just excellent defense. And so again, as long as that shoulder bounces back and he has arm strength to play shortstop, I think this would just be a great addition to the team. So as I talked about in my last episode, again, the Braves have no good internal options anywhere close to the majors for shortstop. It's Orlando Arcia or nothing. So again, you could say, well, why would you prioritize shortstop? You have Arcia in place. Yeah, but Arcia really is more a utility player. He's a below average hitter. His defense has actually come down a little bit each year over the last 2 or 3 years. And so this would allow you to play him in his more, honestly, what he should be doing in the utility backup role, give you more depth, which, Anthopoulos is talking a lot about, and put a better player at a premium position. The fact that Kim won't be ready until May doesn't concern me in terms of just the timetable. If I can get him, especially on a multi-year deal, it matters even less. And Arcia can cover until then, right? You can start Arcia until Kim is ready to go. So again, with this episode, I'm not saying the Braves can only get one of these guys. I really believe that they're waiting for something. I've seen a couple things on social media that make me, maybe it's conspiracy theory, but some people think the Braves might be waiting for the international signing period to hit. You got the Roki Sasaki thing happening. Not necessarily they're going to get Sasaki, though that would be awesome and totally change the offseason, but that some other teams are obviously maybe waiting and seeing what Sasaki's going to do, and the Braves could trade with some of those teams or that sort of thing, and that it could impact how active they are, and after the international signing period, the Braves are going to be much more active. I can kind of believe that. Okay, so if that's the case, if the Braves are willing to go over the CBT threshold, at least the first one, then they can do more than one move, and they might get multiple of these guys. But again, if I'm going to prioritize one position, then I'm going to go shortstop, and I'm going to lock down my infield and my infield depth. So in reality, I think Ha-Seong Kim plus at least one of these other guys is totally realistic. Kim, where you're not giving up anything, you don't have to, it's not qualifying offer, anything like that. Maybe Kim plus a Luis Robert. You don't have to give up much to get him either. Then you go out and get a bargain free agent starter, and maybe one reliever. And I think you could do all that. I really do. So, and I wanted to mention one other scenario that is, it's interesting me more and more as I think about it. And if I think about the Braves' internal discussions. So One last scenario I've been thinking about, and you guys tell me if I'm crazy to think that the Braves might be considering doing this. And again, I'm not necessarily saying I would do it, but could the Braves be considering this? Marcell Ozuna plays left field. Hang with me, okay? People have been talking about Ozuna looks like he's in the best shape of his life. That may or may not be true, but let's just say Marcell Ozuna could play left field. Kelenic and De La Cruz start the year platooning in right field. In that scenario, this would allow Drake Baldwin to start the year at the big league club as your DH and backup catcher and basically hit every day. You could get him in the lineup, nearly every day at the big league level. So if Ozuna could play left field when Ronald comes back, De La Cruz could get DFA'd. Jared Kelenic is just your fourth outfielder at that point, and you could again keep Baldwin at the big league level. And reports are the Braves love Baldwin, so you keep Baldwin at the big league level, and you kind of operate him like the situation with d'Arnaud 2 years ago with d'Arnaud and Murphy, where your backup catcher can also DH because he's one of your better hitters. Okay, so, and you also leave the DH open if Ozuna can play left field for Ronald occasionally if he needs to when he comes back to DH as well. Okay, and then Kelenic could play the outfield in those days. So, if Ozuna can somewhat handle left field, then your lineup is way better in this scenario. Okay, so this would be, and in this scenario, just for fun, I'm adding Ha-Seong Kim. Okay, I'm just saying that happens. All right, so Ronald Acuna leading off, Austin Riley batting second, Marcell Ozuna in left hitting third, Matt Olson fourth, Ozzie Albies fifth, Michael Harris sixth, Sean Murphy seven, Drake Baldwin eight, Ha-Seong Kim shortstop nine. That's a really good lineup, and that's only with one addition offensively. So it's interesting to me. I think Marcell Ozuna might actually see the field some this year with Ronald coming back. I think it almost has to happen in some scenarios to keep Ozuna and his bat, which is so important for the Braves offense, in the lineup. I mean, Ronald is probably going to have to DH some. So if that's going to happen anyways, could he play left field most days? I don't know. Obviously, I like that lineup, but it's obvious that Marcell Ozuna in the outfield could be totally unrealistic. His knees might just be shot. Obviously, his arm is a noodle arm. He had a shoulder injury that zapped his arm strength. So you would clearly be sacrificing a lot to put him out in left field. But if he could hold up, then your offense potentially is better. So, if it meant that, okay, we don't have to address left field, right, and we can focus our attention in the offseason to shortstop, starting pitcher, and relief pitcher, and it makes it easier to fill those, maybe that's why you do that. And your bench is stronger with Arcia as your utility guy, and Kelenic as your fourth outfielder, right? Your bench is already way stronger than it has been the last couple of years. So I just wanted to throw that scenario out there. I think it's worth thinking about, and let's just watch this offseason play out. If the Braves add a left fielder, it probably removes that potential. But if they don't, then I think it probably shows you where their head is at in terms of strategy moving forward in 2025. All right, guys. Well, look, for the moves that could be out there, there's going to be disagreement. If you guys maybe you like someone I didn't even mention, or argue with me in terms of these other guys that I'm saying, I didn't approve of, and I went with my top four. So please give me your comments. I appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode of Stay the Braves. I'll talk to you soon.